Sure, I think we're reality-producing machines. I mean, there's no single individual on this planet who doesn't create reality unless they have a brain injury or something. But for the most part, most of us are engaged in reality, you know, and we do cause effects. I think we reach a certain point in our life where we stop learning and we start feeling. And when we use feelings as a barometer for the unknown, it's contraindicated, because feelings are usually a record of a past experience. So we try to predict how that future event is going to be based on a feeling, and we always return back to the old self again. So I love the idea of how we can actually produce effects. I love the idea that every human being either lives in one of two states of mind. We either live in creation, which is growth and expansion, and it's health and homeostasis. The emotions of love and joy and trust make us feel connected to something bigger than us. Or we live in a state of survival, and a state of survival is living in stress, and living in stress is when your body is knocked out of balance, and the redundancy of that cycle over time, that imbalance that keeps happening, begins to break the body down. And I think the biggest problem for us, because of the size of our brains, is we can turn on the stress response just by thought alone, and we do it all day long. And that continuous, redundant being out of balance over time, that imbalance becomes the new balance. And now we're headed for contraction and disease and feeling separate from the field and being selfish instead of selfless. We begin to live in a state of breakdown, in a state of disease and a lack of health. And so then those emotions then of those survival chemicals endorse the ego. And then we become more self-indulgent and more self-important and more self-serving, because that's what those chemicals do. So we live in one of those two states of mind. Now, those chemicals tend to be highly addictive. So this is really good dinner conversation. We can talk about it, right? But actually breaking through, that's, I think, when you free yourself from the chains of those emotions that we memorize, when we actually break through, when we remove that mind out of the body, when we break the emotion that's trapped in physical flesh and the body's liberated, that's true self-love. That's true joy. It's the liberation of energy. So the anger that once was in there, the hatred that was once in there, the prejudice that was once in there, is transformed, it's transmuted into joy. And it's the same energy, but it just has a different spin. And so no one can do that for you. You know, that isn't something where someone, you know, waves a wand and then it happens. You have to actually be willing to be uncomfortable as you break that addiction and be okay with it. And then the moment the body's liberated and you feel that expansion, that's the natural state of being. Now you say, I love myself so much because I went further than I thought I could go. I transcended some limitation about myself in the way I think, in the way I act, in the way I feel. That's the personality, that's the identity. Changing one of those things, really changing it, not just like changing your mind like I want vanilla ice cream instead of chocolate ice cream, but truly changing something that changes your neurology or neurocircuitry, changes the chemistry, which is your emotions that signal the gene that begins to change your very expression of health and the very expression of life. I'm talking about when you make that emphatic, you know, declaration where you make that change and it's undeniable. There's a biological, neurological, and quantum effect as a result of it. Well, I think I flirt primarily with the idea of how subjective mind has an effect on the objective world. You know, Newtonian physics is about cause and effect. It's about something outside of you fundamentally changing something inside of you. You know, we are an expression or a reflection of the environment. So as long as the environment is influencing how we're thinking and feeling, we can only be as great as the environment. So, and if we're thinking and feeling equal to the environment, we could only create more of the same environment. You know, the idea that we can change something inside of us, in our consciousness, in our thoughts, and in our feelings, and be able to memorize both neurologically in our brain and hardwire that information, install hardware, and condition the body emotionally to be a mind, so mind and body are working together, if we're able to maintain that modified state of being, then there should be some evidence outside of us. So instead of cause and effect, I always love the idea of causing effects, and to cause an effect. So the quantum model says you can cause an effect, and so I think where we get stuck with that is the idea that, that it has to be predictable, that we should be able to know how it's going to happen, and that is, I think, our biggest error, because we can never control the outcome of the unpredictable. That's the quantum model. It has to be uncertain. It has to come in a way that we least expect, that surprises us, that leaves no doubt that what we did inside of us produced some effect outside of us. And when you begin to have those small synchronicities at first, and then they turn into larger and larger events, and you experience that awe and that wonder, or that joy and appreciation for being alive, I think that's the natural state of being. I think that's having that kind of sensibility coming from within us instead of needing something outside of us to change our state. I think that's true empowerment.